You wake up tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes. Something deeper. A weight that was already there before the alarm, before the first notification, before the day had a chance to ask anything of you. You lie there for a moment and do the math. 8 hours, maybe more, and still this. Still the heaviness behind the eyes, the low hum of something unfinished, something you can't name. It's not the work. It's not the schedule. You've had harder weeks and felt more alive in them. So what is it? There was a man who lived 400 years ago who would have understood this feeling, not from a book, not from theory, but from the inside. He spent decades walking alone, sleeping rough, refusing comfort on purpose. He fought over 60 duels and never lost a single one. And by every external measure, his life was harder than yours by an order of magnitude. He was never tired like this. His name was Miyamoto Musashi. And the thing he knew, the thing that took him a lifetime of blood and silence to learn, had nothing to do with discipline, nothing to do with waking up early or optimizing your morning. It was something older than that, quieter. But we'll get there. First, the exhaustion. Because I think we misunderstand it completely. We treat tiredness as a resource problem. Not enough sleep, not enough rest, not enough time away from screens. So we add things. Magnesium supplements, meditation apps, weekend retreats, and sometimes it helps, for a while. But the weight comes back, because the weight isn't coming from what you're doing. It's coming from the gap between what you're doing and what you actually are. Musashi called it something close to Suki, an opening, a gap, a moment of inner division where you're half here and half somewhere else. He was talking about combat, technically. A fighter with Suki telegraphs his strikes. His body moves one way, while his mind drifts another. And in a duel, that gap gets you killed. But he meant something larger. He always meant something larger. Do not let the body be dragged along by the mind, he wrote in the Book of Five Rings. Nor the mind be dragged along by the body. Read that again. Sit with it. Because what he's describing isn't a fighting technique. It's the exact sensation of modern exhaustion. The body doing one thing while the mind runs its own parallel errands. The meeting you're in while composing the email you'll send after. The conversation you're having while rehearsing a different one. Split. Always split. And split things tire faster. He wasn't born wise. That part always gets lost. The young Musashi was ferocious and unruly, fighting his first duel at 13, killing a grown man before his voice had fully changed. He wandered the roads of feudal Japan half feral, picking fights, sleeping under trees, eating whatever he could find. He smelled, apparently. He rarely bathed. He was, by most accounts, deeply difficult to be around. But he was paying attention to something the rest of the world wasn't. Every duel taught him something not about his opponent, but about himself. About the place inside where he hesitated. About the half second where he wanted to survive too badly. Where the outcome mattered too much. Where he was fighting the future instead of the present moment. That half second, that Suki, was the only thing that could ever beat him. So he spent decades trying to close it. Not through force. Not through more training, more reps, more preparation, though he did all of that too. But through something that looks, from the outside, a lot like emptying. He stopped wanting things from his duels. He stopped needing to win. He started showing up to fights the way you'd show up to watch rain, present, attentive, without agenda. Think lightly of yourself and deeply of the world, he wrote later, much later, when his hands were slower, but his mind had gone still as water. It sounds passive. It is the opposite of passive. I want you to, if you're finding something in this, if this way of thinking about exhaustion and presence feels like something you've been circling for a while, there are more of these. More figures. More forgotten ideas that don't show up in productivity threads. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. We're building something quiet here. By the time Musashi was in his 50s, he had stopped fighting. Not because he'd lost his edge. By all accounts, he was more dangerous at 50 than at 30. He'd stopped because there was no one left worth fighting, not because they weren't skilled. Because fighting requires something from you, a kind of inner noise, an engagement with outcome. And he had become so still that the noise just didn't start anymore. He withdrew to a cave called Rigondo, alone. No students, no admirers, no comfort. Just rock and dark and the sound of water somewhere below. He was in his early 60s and he knew he was dying. In that cave, he wrote the Dokodo, 21 precepts, scratched out a week before his death. Not a summary of technique, not a lesson plan. Something more like a man noting, quietly, what he had finally understood. Accept everything just the way it is. Not resignation, not giving up. Something harder than either of those. A complete release of the friction between what is and what you think should be. The exhaustion of that friction is, I think, what you woke up feeling this morning. The constant low-level argument your nervous system is having with reality. The mental energy spent on outcomes you can't control. On versions of yourself you're not yet. On conversations that haven't happened and may never happen. Musashi sat in a cave in the dark and let all of it go. Now the duel, because you need to feel this one. April 13th, 1612. The island of Ganryujima, off the coast of what is now Kitakyushu. Musashi's most famous opponent, Sasaki Kojiro, known as the demon of the western provinces, was already there, had been there, waiting. Kojiro was everything Musashi was not: refined, immaculate, trained in a formal school with a formal name. His technique was called Tsubame Geishi, the swallow counter. A strike so fast it was said to cut a bird from the air mid-flight. He carried a nodachi, a blade so long it had earned its own name, the drying pole. He had arrived on time. He was furious. Musashi arrived late. By some accounts, over 2 hours late. He came by boat, still half asleep apparently, carving a wooden sword from the oar as he crossed the water. He stepped onto the shore, unhurried, unkempt. This rough-edged man who had spent his whole life refusing polish. Kojiro drew his sword and threw the scabbard into the sea. Musashi looked at it. Then he said quietly, "You've already lost." The reasoning, which Musashi apparently never fully explained, was this: a man who throws away his scabbard has committed to death or victory. He has made the outcome the point. He has filled himself with something: anger, pride, the need to matter, that takes up space where stillness should be. Musashi had crossed the water empty. They fought. It was over in seconds. Musashi's wooden sword, carved from an oar, unfinished, ridiculous, came down on Kojiro's skull before the drying pole finished its arc. Kojiro died on that beach, the finest technical swordsman of his era, beaten by a man with a piece of wood he'd made on the way over. Musashi walked back to his boat without looking back. There's a thing that happens, I think, when you understand this. Really understand it. Not as a story about samurai, but as a story about the inside of you, where the exhaustion starts to look different. It's not that you've been doing too much. It's that you've been arriving at your own life the way Kojiro arrived at that island, armed, prepared, committed, with everything at stake. And that state of perpetual high stakes, that constant gripping, is the most tiring thing a human being can do. More tiring than hard work. More tiring than difficulty. You don't need more rest. You need to stop throwing the scabbard. Musashi left the cave one morning. This is the image I keep coming back to. And walked out into light. He had written his precepts. He had, nothing left to resolve. He died 9 weeks later, peacefully, sitting upright. What gets me is the walking out. After years of silence, of stone walls, of going all the way down into whatever's at the bottom of a person, he walked back out into the world, not transformed into something unrecognizable, just aligned. The gap closed, the body and the mind moving together at last. He was tired, probably. He was old. His hands shook when he wrote. But not that tired. Not the way you woke up this morning. Tell me in the comments, what drains your energy the most right now? I'm curious if it's what I think it is.